When most people hear the term Pope Francis's mansion, visions of majestic corridors, gilded ceilings, and lavish surroundings come to mind. Yet, the reality is far from such opulence. In stark contrast to the popes who came before him, those who resided in the Grand Apostolic Palace, Pope Francis made a choice that left many stunned. He turned down luxury and instead opted for a humble dwelling. The Domus Sanctae Martha, or as it's more commonly known, Casa Santa Marta. This unassuming guest house sits within the walls of the Vatican, and Pope Francis's decision to live there was seen as nothing short of revolutionary at the time. But what could drive the most influential spiritual leader on earth to forsake centuries of grandeur and comfort? Was it an act of humility, or was there a deeper motive? Pope Francis often voiced a desire for a church that is poor and for the poor. His decision to inhabit a plain, sparsely decorated room, devoid of luxury or privilege, was emblematic of that mission. There were no ornate apartments, no regal accommodations, just a modest space like any other guest might occupy. But then, something unusual occurred. Following his passing, Vatican authorities swiftly moved to seal off the very room that once symbolized his humility. The simple quarters, once accessible and unguarded, were suddenly locked tight. No explanations were provided. Visitors were turned away, some of them highly ranked members of the clergy. It sparked a wave of questions. What could be hidden behind those locked doors that required such immediate and complete protection? Was this truly a matter of protocol? Or was there something within those walls that had the potential to rock the church to its core? This was never just about Pope Francis's sleeping quarters. It was about what he may have left behind. As speculation grew, the public began to wonder. Was his life of simplicity genuine, or was it a carefully crafted cover for something much more significant? Let's delve further into the layers of this enigma, because the seemingly modest lifestyle of Pope Francis may have concealed a web of intricacies far more complex than anyone imagined. Known affectionately around the world as the People's Pope, Pope Francis distinguished himself immediately upon assuming the papacy. He dismissed the grand displays of wealth, refused the gold-adorned throne, and walked amongst the faithful like a common man. From the very beginning, it was evident he did not intend to follow in the footsteps of previous pontiffs. But beneath this image of humble sincerity, was there a tactical plan at play? For years, the Pope's preference for simplicity was seen as a reflection of his broader mission: to reform the Church, to make it more accessible to the impoverished and the marginalized. His home at Casa Santa Marta was not just where he slept. It became a living statement of that belief. And yet, with his passing and the sudden lockdown of his living quarters, new doubts began to emerge. Some within the Vatican now suggest that Pope Francis used his modest surroundings not merely as a symbol, but as a sanctuary, a quiet base of operations where letters were drafted, reform plans were discussed, and sensitive matters were kept away from those who might have opposed his vision. As one Vatican insider reportedly put it, he lived simply, but his thoughts were anything but small. Could it be that those plain walls of Casa Santa Marta sheltered more than a pope's personal effects? Might they contain the very blueprint for a reimagined church? A church reshaped by Pope Francis's secret ideas, ambitions, and possibly even revolutionary strategies. Now, with Vatican security standing guard, the significance of that humble room has transformed. It's no longer just a symbol of modesty. It's become the epicenter of something concealed, something potentially powerful. And when Vatican authorities sealed it off, they weren't merely preserving a pope's memory. They may have been safeguarding revelations that could alter the Church's path forever. Was this all simply in line with tradition? Or was the Vatican rushing to shield secrets that, if exposed, could send shockwaves through the global Catholic community? It's time to look more closely at what really happens when a pope's residence is secured, and why, in this case, the event felt anything but ordinary. The Vatican has long followed a specific set of rituals upon the death of a pontiff. One of these involves sealing off his living quarters, a gesture intended to protect personal effects, important letters, and sensitive documentation until a formal review can be conducted. Under ordinary circumstances, it's a quiet and uneventful process. But this time, things were different. When the guards moved to shut down Pope Francis's residence, a ripple of unease swept through the Eternal City. Whispers turned into speculation. Why the haste? Why the silence? Reports began to trickle in. Claims that confidential writings, private correspondences, and even a list of names were hidden inside. But these weren't said to be mere historical records. They were thought to be forward-looking plans, potential reforms that Pope Francis had never been able to bring to the public eye. According to one Vatican official, the contents of that room were not just the past, they represent the future of the Church. This statement ignited a storm of rumors. Could there really be documents that outlined a succession strategy, proposals to dramatically reshape the Church, perhaps even initiatives that some powerful figures in the Vatican were desperate to keep buried? What truly raised eyebrows, however, was the exclusion of even senior cardinals from the premises. Denied access, they too were left in the dark. What was so crucial, so delicate, that even high-ranking members of the Church hierarchy were blocked from entering? The locking down of Pope Francis's quarters no longer looked like tradition. It looked like a race to contain something potentially explosive. And amidst this swirl of secrecy and speculation, one name kept surfacing with increasing frequency. A figure believed to be deeply entwined with these hidden plans, a name that could be central to understanding what Pope Francis may have left behind: Luis Antonio. So, what exactly did Pope Francis leave behind? And why does the name Luis Antonio Tagle continue to emerge at the heart of it all? As we peer into the deeper layers of this Vatican enigma, a startling possibility comes to light. Hidden behind the sealed doors of his modest quarters may lie something far more consequential than personal effects. A plan. A roadmap that could redefine the Catholic Church's future. When the Vatican abruptly sealed Pope Francis's humble room, few could have predicted the surge of speculation that would follow. What initially appeared to be a standard procedure quickly turned into a firestorm of rumors. Whispers emerged, not about trivial belongings, but about explosive documents. And these weren't mere handwritten notes or reflections. According to sources close to the matter, the contents were extraordinary. A detailed blueprint, designed by Pope Francis himself to radically transform the Church. Leaked accounts spoke of letters, personally penned by Francis, outlining proposals far bolder than anything he had publicly declared. There were elaborate reform strategies, deeply considered visions for a more welcoming and inclusive Church, and most controversial of all, a short list of individuals he believed capable of advancing his mission. Traditionally, popes do not name successors. It goes against centuries of ecclesiastical protocol. But Pope Francis was never known for clinging to the old rules. He was keenly aware of the opposition he faced and the fragility of reform. Without someone equally daring to pick up where he left off, his vision might perish. As one source from within the Vatican quietly noted, Francis didn't merely wish for transformation, he mapped it out. And repeatedly, one name surfaced throughout those pages: Luis Antonio Tagle. The documents reportedly did more than just reference him. They placed him at the center of a church reborn, one that embraced empathy, equality, and relevance in a changing world. If these reports are accurate, then Pope Francis had no intention of letting his legacy fade away. He was guiding it, deliberately and methodically, even after his death. But this revelation invites even more pressing questions. Why were such documents hidden? Were they meant to emerge at the right time? Or were they kept under wraps to avoid an immediate backlash from the Vatican's more conservative elements? And if Tagle was indeed a key figure in this hidden narrative, what does that mean for the Church's future? It's now apparent that these weren't just letters. They may have been the foundation for a silent revolution, carefully timed and waiting for ignition. So who is this man who now finds himself at the center of such a monumental plan? For years, Luis Antonio Tagle moved quietly through the corridors of the Vatican, rarely attracting headlines or commanding attention. Known for his humility, his soft-spoken demeanor, and his deep connection to everyday believers, he was never one to chase recognition. Yet, someone noticed him. Someone whose opinion mattered profoundly: Pope Francis. Tagle's journey from the bustling streets of Manila to the inner sanctums of the Vatican wasn't accidental. It was built on a foundation of shared ideals, unspoken trust, and countless conversations away from the public eye. Many began referring to him as the Asian Francis, a moniker that carried weight. Like Pope Francis, he valued humility over hierarchy, kindness over control. Behind closed doors, the two were said to have held numerous meetings, discussing not just current challenges, but bold visions for the Church's evolution. As one insider revealed, Francis didn't see Tagle as just another cardinal. He saw in him a continuation of a dream. Over time, Tagle was entrusted with delicate missions, global diplomatic roles, and church reforms that aligned seamlessly with Francis's philosophy. It became increasingly evident to observant insiders. Tagle wasn't simply a rising figure. He was being prepared. But prepared for what? Now, with the revelation of concealed documents, the picture is becoming clearer. Tagle wasn't just a loyal aide. He may have been Pope Francis's chosen successor in a covert succession plan. And yet, Tagle never displayed ambition. He never lobbied for position or hinted at aspirations. This humility only made him more compelling to a pontiff who believed deeply in service over status. Was this quiet mentorship part of a grander design? As the clues begin to form a cohesive narrative, a profound question emerges. Did Pope Francis, fully aware of his limited time, craft a transition plan intended to shape the Church long after he was gone? According to long-standing church law, popes are not to choose their successors. The decision is left to the College of Cardinals in solemn conclave. Yet if anyone could subtly guide the future without violating this tradition, it was Pope Francis. For years, Francis openly discussed the possibility of retirement and was transparent about his declining health. But in hindsight, his actions appear far more strategic. He wasn't just making peace with the end of his papacy. He was preparing the Church for the next chapter. Privately, many believe he had been crafting a hidden succession framework, not through declarations, but through personal trust, mentorship, and positioning the right individuals, like Luis Antonio Tagle, in influential roles. As one Vatican analyst summarized, Francis didn't gamble with the future, he cultivated it, and Tagle was his strongest seed. Suddenly, the decision to seal Pope Francis's room takes on a weightier significance. Perhaps it wasn't about preserving mere belongings, but about safeguarding strategic documents that could reveal how meticulously the former pontiff prepared the next phase of the Church's evolution. If those sealed pages confirm Tagle as the central figure in this quiet transition, it would explain much. The swift and unexplained rise of Tagle within Vatican ranks, the deep personal trust he earned from Francis, and the immediate urgency with which the residence was locked down. It suggests this was not merely about protecting the past, but about shaping the future with calculated precision. Would you like me to continue with what happens next if these revelations go public, or delve deeper into Tagle's influence and the possible fallout within the Vatican? Following the passing of Pope Francis, his private quarters became the center of intrigue. But any grand vision he left behind wouldn't come without significant peril. Powerful entities embedded deep within the church hierarchy would go to great lengths to retain their grip on authority. And a potential successor like Luis Antonio Tagle, known for his progressive ideals, represented a direct challenge to the established order. Could this explain the Vatican's swift and careful approach in controlling how and when these explosive revelations would surface? Now, the world holds its breath. Was Pope Francis's quiet but deliberate strategy enough to secure the longevity of his vision? Or will entrenched opposition within the Church succeed in burying his dreams along with his remains? One undeniable truth stands out. If Tagle truly is the Pope's hand-picked successor, his role is far more significant than anyone could have imagined. But what does that role entail? Is it about reform, a quiet revolution, or a gamble with immense consequences? If the confidential whispers emerging from behind the Vatican's thick walls hold any truth, if Luis Antonio Tagle was indeed at the heart of Pope Francis's clandestine vision, then he's not merely stepping into a leadership role. He's stepping onto a razor's edge, stretched between the Church's long-held past and an uncertain, evolving future. And beneath that edge, there is no safety net. Tagle's public persona has always exuded quiet resilience and heartfelt empathy. From his formative years in the Philippines, he was seen as a man of action through presence, a cardinal who chose to listen rather than lecture. He immersed himself in the lives of the impoverished, stood in solidarity with refugees, and lent his voice to those abandoned not only by society, but at times, by the Church itself. In many ways, Tagle became the embodiment of what Pope Francis had labored for, a church that chooses compassion over condemnation and humility over authority. But with the reported discovery of concealed documents in Pope Francis's sealed quarters, papers said to outline a sweeping plan for change, Tagle now faces a mission that far surpasses mere charity or pastoral duties. This challenge isn't simply about kindness. It's about confronting centuries of tradition, breaking unspoken codes, and standing up to forces that believe the Church's identity must remain untouched. As one Vatican insider aptly put it, Tagle is not just being asked to lead, he's being asked to complete what Francis began. And that's a perilous road. Every step toward reform carries a potential backlash. Should Tagle advocate for broader inclusion of marginalized groups, women, or interfaith cooperation, he risks being branded not a visionary, but a heretic by those who see such moves as dilution, not evolution. It's important to remember, within the Vatican, power rarely screams, it whispers. It smiles while scheming, and it cloaks resistance in tradition. If Tagle does take the mantle, he won't be entering a sanctuary of support. He'll be walking into a battleground where ancient structures mask contemporary struggles. Here, tradition isn't a relic, it's a weapon, sharpened to defend against any who would alter the Church's course. So, what exactly has Tagle been called to do? Is his mission to gently update the Church's relevance in a modern world? Or is it something far more profound? Could it be a silent, deliberate revolution, wrapped in the soft language of mercy, but intended to challenge institutions that have withstood millennia? Whatever the answer, one thing is undeniable. It's a risk few would dare shoulder. But for Tagle, with Pope Francis's trust resting on his shoulders, and perhaps a sacred promise to fulfill, retreat is no longer an option. This is no longer about personal ambition or even spiritual calling. It has become a burden of responsibility, one that may shape the Church's identity for generations to come. Yet, let there be no illusion. Tagle doesn't stand surrounded by unwavering allies. While the global faithful may look on with optimism, forces within the Vatican are already assembling their resistance. Because where whispers of revolution stir, resistance always follows. Let's peel back the curtain on what lies in the shadows, a subtle but potent pushback forming in the heart of Rome. For every public voice cheering for progress, there's always a quieter one lurking in the background, whispering, "Not so fast." And inside the fortified walls of the Vatican, those whispers aren't mere opinions, they are strategic maneuvers. Often, those murmured doubts carry more influence than the loudest cheers. Throughout his papacy, Pope Francis didn't just lead congregations. He engaged in silent, grueling conflicts. These weren't brawls fought out in front of cameras, but covert power struggles unfolding behind mahogany doors and inside hallowed halls where the weight of tradition trumps any bold vision. His efforts to guide the Church toward openness and empathy were met with praise by millions worldwide. But behind Vatican walls, many in the conservative elite saw each step toward reform not as progress, but as an existential threat. They viewed his compassion as compromise, his inclusivity as instability. And with that fear came mobilization, a quiet but determined movement to preserve the Church not as a living body, but as a monument to the past. For years, entrenched factions within the Church have quietly waited, watching, enduring, and plotting. Now, with Pope Francis gone, they see not a moment to grieve, but a chance to reclaim what they feel has slowly slipped from their grasp. In their way stands Luis Antonio Tagle, a figure seen by many as a beacon of faith and progress, but by the old guard, as something far more threatening, the living, breathing symbol of Francis's unfinished revolution. According to whispers from deep inside the Vatican, one insider even went so far as to warn that a Tagle-led church could dismantle generations of hierarchical control. This isn't mere fear of change, it's the terror of relinquishing power. Could this underlying anxiety be the true reason why the Vatican moved with such urgency to secure Pope Francis's private residence? Was it really about preserving a legacy, or a calculated attempt to suppress the most radical parts of his vision? If these documents were ever made public, they might very well push the Church toward a future that many within its walls are desperate to delay, if not avoid altogether. A quiet but critical struggle is unfolding, one that most Catholics around the globe will never witness. It's not defined by dramatic proclamations, but by measured silence, strategic holdups, and subtle behind-the-scenes power shifts. It's a clash between those who believe the Church must transform in order to endure, and those who insist survival depends on maintaining the status quo. Whether or not he ever sought this role, Tagle now finds himself squarely in the center of that conflict. Every statement he makes, or chooses not to, will be dissected by those eager to challenge his every move. And in such an environment, silent resistance can be the most treacherous of all, because it remains hidden until it strikes. The critical question remains, can Tagle rise above this unseen wall of opposition? Or will these covert forces succeed in permanently sealing away Pope Francis's most daring aspirations, ensuring they remain in the dark forever? But this battle is not solely confined to the Vatican's marbled halls. The consequences of this inner war will ripple far beyond Rome, shaping the lives of over 1 billion Catholics and affecting the Church's involvement in urgent global matters, from human rights and poverty to climate change and migration. If Tagle dares to press forward, even in the face of stiff resistance, could the truths hidden within Pope Francis's sealed quarters ignite a transformation that echoes across the entire planet? Let's explore what might be at stake, how these buried truths could launch a bold new era for the Catholic Church, and why the global community should be watching closely. If Luis Antonio Tagle truly steps into the role that many believe Pope Francis had quietly carved out for him, the shockwaves won't stop at Vatican borders. His leadership could usher in a monumental shift, from a historically Europe-centric institution to a genuinely global religious movement, deeply connected with growing populations across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Under a Tagle papacy, the Church may begin to focus less on doctrine alone and more on the pressing humanitarian issues facing the world today: climate change, forced migration, systemic poverty, and social injustice. As one analyst put it, this is not merely a religious pivot, it's a redefinition of the Church's place in the modern world. A church led by Tagle could very well become a symbol of interfaith collaboration, a champion of universal human rights, and a voice calling for long overdue inclusion and equality. But with transformation comes turbulence. Governments, political forces, and traditionalists may resist a church that dares to confront global politics and societal norms, especially when its influence spills far beyond the pulpit. Perhaps this was Pope Francis's true intent all along, to entrust his mission to someone who could dismantle outdated barriers and bring the Church into relevance for a modern, multicultural, and divided world. If that's the case, then what was tucked away behind those sealed doors wasn't just a trove of confidential memos. It was a blueprint for global change. Now, as fragments of that plan begin to surface, the world faces one final, defining question. What does the future hold for the Catholic Church? And is Tagle prepared to confront it? With the mansion sealed and its secrets momentarily hidden, the tremors from within Pope Francis's residence have already begun to shake the very foundations of the Church. Around the world, eyes are fixed on Luis Antonio Tagle, waiting to see whether he will emerge and fulfill the destiny suggested by those elusive documents. Will he embrace the path laid out by Francis, or will the pressure from centuries-old tradition and entrenched resistance prove too formidable? Tagle has yet to publicly comment on the alleged revelations, but sometimes the absence of words says more than 1,000 speeches. Now, the Church stands at a pivotal juncture. One road leads back to the familiar embrace of the past, the other forward into uncharted but potentially transformative terrain. As a Vatican scholar recently stated, this is not merely about who leads the Church, it's about the very soul of the Church itself. So what happens next? Will Tagle rise as the leader Pope Francis quietly groomed him to be? Or will those shadowy forces within the Vatican succeed in entombing his vision forever? Only one thing is certain. Whatever was discovered inside Pope Francis's residence has changed the game. And this story is far from over. Stay with us, because history is unfolding right before our eyes.